This video aims at describing important practices for running a quantitative descriptive analysis, or QDA. As a panel leader, start by getting to know your samples. Take note of important sensory traits describing each sample. Remember to clean your taste palette between different samples. First step in the QDA, brainstorming. When serving samples to your assessors, use identical and neutral trays or glasses for all samples. These should be marked with a randomized 3-digit code, one code for each sample. These codes could be handwritten, or alternatively, you could print out labels. Avoid using similar looking codes to reduce any confusion. It is important to have control over which code represents which sample. Before serving, try to homogenize the sample as much as possible. Make sure that each assessor gets a similar amount of product. Consider using lids in order to reduce any smell or to dry out the product. Once the samples are ready, serve them to your assessors. In the brainstorming session, each assessor will write down all the sensory attributes that they recognized in the product. The purpose of this is to generate different sensory attributes that are later reviewed in the QDA. Go through the different sensory attributes they are written down with the panel. Try to find which sensory attributes are important for these products. If you are also assessing the appearance and color of the product, it is wise to use a standardized color system. Step 2. The pre-test. The purpose of the pre-test is to try out the sensory attributes that you generated in the brainstorming. It is common to serve 2 samples in the pre-test. Try to find the 2 most different samples out of your sample set. This is in order to ensure that your attributes cover the whole sensory aspect of the product served in the experiment. Before the assessors taste the 2 samples, go through each sensory attributes in beforehand to make sure they all agree on what the different attributes mean. If possible, it can be useful to have references that describe a certain sensory aspect of the attributes. Once the assessors agree on what the attributes mean, it's time to do the pretest. It is important that the assessors do the pretest individually. The assessors should look, smell and taste the products. it is important that the assessors spit out the product after tasting and cleanse their taste palate by drinking a sip of water. In the pre-test, the assessor will rate the different sensory attributes using 1 to 9 scales. This can be done using specialized software or pen and paper. Once all the assessors are done tasting the 2 samples, combine all their data and review it together with them. This is useful for finding out which of the chosen sensory attributes are relevant to the products in this experiment and which one can be removed. By using a free software like Panel Check, it is possible to visualize the assessor's data in the pretest by generating one graph for each sensory attribute that was reviewed. The important part is that all the assessors agree as much as possible on which of the 2 samples in the pretest has the highest or lowest rating of a given sensory attribute. Part 3. The main test. The main test is where you serve all the different samples in the experiment to the assessors. The data gathered in the main test is the final and most important dataset gathered in the QDA. The list of sensory attributes should now have been finalized. Once you have started the main test, it is too late to make changes to this list. In a QDA, it is important that each sample is served to the assessors at least twice to make sure that they can reproduce their assessments. These are called replicates. In this example, a total of 5 different raspberry jams are being assessed, and by serving each jam in 2 replicates, the total amount of samples served in the main test is 10. Avoid serving all samples at once, and rather split them up into different sessions. Once all the data has been gathered in the main test, the tasting aspect of the QDA is complete. This dataset can now be used to determine the sensory characteristics that describe each of the different samples in the experiment. You can see which samples are similar and which ones are different from a sensory aspect. For each of the sensory attributes, you can now use statistical analysis to see which samples are significantly different from each other with regards to a certain sensory attribute. Again, a free software like Panel Check can be used to visualize this data in the form of plots and graphs.